Is this any better? We had a comment that some people couldn't hear. Is everybody able to hear or? Sorry for the pause, guys. So if you are not able to hear, you may want to check your audio settings to make sure that you're connected through the mic and the speakers. Okay, I'm going to keep on. So again, I'm going to direct us to the live binder, and we're going to click on the link that's going to take us to the KEA live binder. And when you get to the live binder, there again are many tabs for you to peruse through that have a ton of information that'll be helpful during this process. However, today I'm going to focus on the green tab that says the 5 domains, February 2015, and I'm going to click on that tab. Here, once you click on the 5 domains, you will see the blue tabs that have the background and research, key points, professional development activities, and then the one that I'm pointing at now, the 5 domains live binder. This is another live binder that is in addition to the K3 formative assessment one, and I'm going to click on this one for a second. And this one is very in good relation to what we are doing today because this binder focuses specifically on the 5 domains of learning and development. And when you go to this tab and click on this binder, there are videos, and each of the orange tabs may be yellow on some screens. They have the 5 domains, and if you click on the individual domains, so I'm going to click on the language and development and communication one, and you go down, and they have 2 more tabs: the what, and they have the key resource. And this just gives you a wealth of information that goes along with each of the domains because there's no way in this 1 hour that we could cover all of this information. So I would, advise that if you have the opportunity to go to the live binder and when you have a minute to go through some of these tabs, and I think you will find that there's some very helpful information. So know that that resource is always available to you. So we're going to click out and go back to the PowerPoint and know that a lot of the information that is on our PowerPoint was taken straight from the Live Binder tab. So the information, if you need to go back, is all housed there. So to begin, we're going to talk about the key point. The K3 formative assessment process focuses on the whole child. That is the key point and the key message that we are hoping to send across today, is that we are focusing on the whole child, and by doing so, we have to look at all 5 of the domains. The K3 formative assessment process focuses on the whole child. This means that it includes attention to areas beyond those typically addressed. We know that each area of development impacts other areas of other developmental areas. For example, if a child has an interest in playing soccer, when a teacher selects early literacy materials that are related to the game of soccer, he or she is tapping into the approaches of learning domain, which therefore may strengthen the language and communication skills by focusing on the whole child versus choosing literacy materials that do not capture the child's interest or the child's engagement. So, just the small task of thinking of what may interest and engage a child could change their learning completely. So, therefore, when we think about and plan for children's learning and development, we need to consider the whole child. So, we're going to begin today with approaches to learning. And the approaches to learning domain focuses on how children learn and includes children's attitudes towards an interest in learning. This reflects behaviors and skills such as curiosity, planning, flexibility, motivation, focus, problem solving, and persistence. Children show these characteristics in the way they learn in all the domains and curriculum areas. So on this slide, we see the approaches to learning think tank claims. So I want to give you a minute in your groups to read over the claims, and I'm going to take just a minute or so to give you time to do that. So in looking at these claims, we're going to talk about an example that goes with each of them. So for number one, students can effectively solve problems by defining goals, describing steps, and evaluating alternative strategies in both academic and social interactions. So an example of evidence in favor of this claim might be revealed in a student's approach to building a self-supporting structure from blocks. A student who had mastered the skills encompassed in this claim would be able to describe, either by using pictures, spoken, or written language, before he or she began building, what the final structure would look like and how he or she would use blocks of various size or shapes in order to accomplish the task. Along the way, the student would be able to identify whether his or her original plan was likely to lead the structure that they had originally envisioned, and if not, then they would be able to readjust the plan as necessary. With older children, the same example would apply in the context of using other instructional manipulatives. And moving to claim 2, students can maintain focus and persevere to accomplish collaborative and individual tasks, whether those tasks are chosen by them or assigned to them. So, an example of this evidence might be observed during whole group or small group time for a student who has little interest in the group's activity. In such a situation, a student might feel a persistent temptation to engage in other activities. A teacher might offer a student options for behaviors to channel that temptation while discouraging other behaviors. The student might be allowed to pace or fidget and be discouraged from disturbing his or her neighbors. A student who had mastered the skills encompassed in this claim would be able to stay engaged in the group's undertaking. Sometimes students may face the same kind of temptation when encountering adversity, accomplishing a task of their own devising. For example, a project they may start proves more challenging than they had anticipated, and they are tempted to abandon it. And when they are pursuing tasks assigned to them, a lesson that does not immediately capture their interest, and they are tempted to not invest themselves in it. In these types of situations, in order to be effective stewards of their own development, students need to be able to marshal the cognitive and emotional resources necessary to stay engaged despite the urge to not. And in Claim 3, it states that students can demonstrate curiosity by seeking opportunities, whether independently or in collaboration with peers and teachers, to extend their knowledge. So, an example of evidence in favor of this claim might be reflected in a student who dovetails assignments or activities in order to build on a principle or theme he or she finds interesting. An example would be choosing a self-selected activity that involves caring for a flowering plant after developing an interest in the botany of a science lesson. And another example is a student intrigued by a story about ants and grasshoppers, and on his or own, at the suggestion of a teacher, extends that interest by either using a magnifying glass to observe these insects on the playground, or requesting books related to this topic, or even searching online to find out more about the insects. This kind of outcome could result from the initiative of the student or in response to the prompting of the teacher. So we're going to look at how does this domain connect to the standard course of study. Well, you see that there are many connections: arts, guidance, helpful living, English language arts, and so on. Approaches to learning encompasses so many of the areas of the curriculum that you are already teaching. This domain can be integrated into your current teaching practices by acknowledging the importance of developing the skills needed for learning, such as curiosity and motivation and focus. And below was an example of a social studies standard course of study, and it references the important approaches to learning in the introductory and supplemental resources. So I know we spent a great deal amount of time on approaches to learning, but that we feel is a domain that can cross so many of the curriculums that you are teaching that we thought it was important to go through some of those examples. So we're going to move on to the second domain of learning and development, which is the cognitive. This domain is one of the two required constructs for the 2015 and 2016 school year, and a children's cognitive capabilities provide the foundation for learning that occurs in school and in life. These cognitive skills include regulating attention, remembering, reasoning, and problem solving, and they enable children to understand new information and apply it to new situations. So again, here are the think tank claims, and this time I'm going to just go through them. And the first one states that students can use content independent abilities and strategies, as well as content specific skills, processes, and approaches to solve problems and acquire information. The second claim states students can make connections to prior learning, construct knowledge, and demonstrate their understanding using multiple modes of expression. And the third claim states that students can come to understand themselves as learners and acquire dispositions, attitudes, beliefs, and values that support their academic engagement. These examples would probably be the most familiar to teachers, because the content standards and the critical thinking skills that are defined in the standard course of study derive from the cognitive domain. And so we're going to look at an example of this on the next slide. So, how does this connect to the standard course of study? Well, some of the connections are through arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. And then below, we see an actual example that is pulled from the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. And it states that understanding the relationship between numbers and quantities, connecting counting to cardinality. So, this is an example of how the cognitive progression of object counting is embedded into the content of what the kindergarten teachers are already teaching. Students are expected to connect counting to cardinality, and the progression specifically focuses on the understanding that children recognize that counting tells the number of objects. And in step D of the progression, which we will get to those next week, states that a child must state or indicate that the last number counted is the total quantity, which is cardinality. And we say this to show that the progressions are not isolated assessments meant to put more work on you, the teacher, but instead to show that if a child is not able to be proficient at this standard with the standard course of study, then they might be at an earlier stage on the progression, which is why they are not able to demonstrate cardinality. And in addition, this is what makes the progressions so helpful, is that you are able to see exactly how a child would progress developmentally in an appropriate way to show you where cardinality would fit into counting. So, moving along, we are going to go into the third domain, which is language development and communication. And the language development and communication domain focuses on the foundational skills that children acquire and use in early elementary school and which continue to develop throughout their schooling. So, some of these skills include speaking, listening, reading, and writing. This domain encompasses nonverbal and verbal language skills used in understanding language and speaking effectively with others, as well as important emergent literacy skills in early reading and writing. And this domain provides an integrated approach for understanding and supporting language and literacy development in children. So we're going to switch things up here a second because I know I've done a lot of talking and just giving you a lot of information. So we're going to give you a chance to work together as a group. And if you will take a minute and read the 3 think tank claims, and as a group, if you will select a word or a phrase from each claim and write it down, and then if you will submit that in the chat box. So again, if you as your group will read the 3 think tank claims, and for each claim, if you will identify the key idea or key phrase or word in each claim and submit that through the chat box. And we're going to give you a few minutes to do that, probably 3 or 4 minutes. So I'm going to mute while y'all have a chance to collaborate.
Okay, if we can pull back together, I just wanted to sum up and emphasize some of the patterns that we noticed in the chat bar in terms of some very insightful language that are embedded into the three language development and communication think tank claims. Some words that we saw come across the chat bar quite often were the words effective, skills, integrate, acquire, comprehending. All of this language that you've used to articulate the important features of these three claims would be something that, as kindergarten teachers, you all would know how important those are in all areas of the curriculum that you're teaching on a daily basis, and the importance of building upon children's language development and their communication skills beyond the reading and writing curriculum. However, we know that in order for children to build upon that, there has to be a portion of the curriculum that is devoted specifically to listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and standards that are based upon that also will be woven into other curriculum areas such as social studies, science, mathematics, even the arts, possibly even building upon some interconnectedness that happens outside on the playground or in special area classes with other teachers who may be supporting that child in a variety of different ways. So when you think about the 5 domains of learning and development, the connection to the current standard course of study, and its relationship to the North Carolina Kindergarten Entry Assessment process, we hope and encourage you to think about this in a very integrated, ongoing, opportunistic way to learn more about children and the language that they are developing over time prior to kindergarten and over the course of their kindergarten year to increase their opportunities to be able to communicate, therefore turning into a reciprocal way of being able to do more in the classroom to indicate what they make, do, say, or write for you as the teacher to elicit evidence that indicates that they actually are learning and developing over time. We hope this is helpful in you understanding that in the process of the pilot, we were able to gather feedback from teachers in these 5 domains of learning and development. And this particular area of language development and communication, and the previous one that's related to cognitive in the area of object counting, are the 2 that will be selected to be utilized in the upcoming school year of the 2015-16 kindergarten entry process, because we felt as though these were areas that you as kindergarten teachers, based on the feedback that you provided, were much more familiar with in relationship to your day-to-day activities and working interactions with students. So let's move on to the next slide as we progress through this process.
So here on the next slide, you see the same format. How does this domain connect to the North Carolina Standard Course of Study? And in the bubble, you see that there are many connections that you can go to through language arts, social studies, science, and below is an example, a kindergarten standard course of study example. So students need to demonstrate understanding of the organization and basic features of print. So again, you see that the North Carolina Standard Course of Study is written to support the language and development and communication domain. So moving along, we are going to talk about the emotional social development domain. And this domain includes children's feelings about themselves and also addresses their ability to relate to others. Learning to manage and express emotions is also a part of this domain. Children's development in this domain affects their development in every other domain. For instance, children who who develop a positive sense of self are more likely to try new things and may work toward reaching goals. And they tend to accept new challenges and feel more confident about their ability to handle problems or difficulties that may arise. And I'm sure as you are listening to that, some kids' names are running through your minds because you know that to be true. So, looking at the think tank claims, you see that one, students can identify and communicate about emotions in themselves and in others. They can talk about and use strategies to regulate responses to their own emotions. They can form and sustain healthy relationships with adults and peers. And they can use appropriate social skills to interact with adults and peers in schools. So, how does this domain connect? And in the bubble, you see that the connections may be with your guidance, with your helpful living, and your social studies. And down below, you see an example. Well, remember the association of healthy expression of emotions, mental health, and healthy behaviors. And, before we leave this domain, I just wanted to emphasize that this domain is so important because we stated that children's development in this area totally affects their development in every other domain. And I think that we see that when we know that a child who has a great sense of self and is confident, that they seem more confident in their learning and moving forward. So, moving along for time's sake, and I know we're going kind of quick now, but we want to get them all in, is the last domain of learning and development, which is the health and physical domain. And this domain focuses on physical growth, motor development, sound nutritional choices, self-care, and health and safety practices. And this domain is the foundation for the future health and well-being of all children. And good physical health and motor development supports children's learning and plays a part in their ability to be successful in almost any type of activity. And in looking at the claims from the think tank on this domain, you see that students can demonstrate conceptual knowledge to support healthy behaviors and the reduction of health risk. They develop skills that contribute to healthy behaviors and the reduction of health risk. And they demonstrate competencies in motor skills and movement patterns. And this relates to the standard course of study through healthful living and physical education. And an example of this one is apply competent motor skills and movement patterns needed to perform a variety of physical activities. So, we real quickly, went through all five of the domains. And again, I want to refer back to the live binder and remind everyone that there is a wealth of information in the live binder that specifically focuses on the 5 domains. And on this slide, we are showing that for the purpose of the KEA, that cognitive development and language and communication development are the 2 required constructs for the 2015-16 school year. And we just kind of wanted to remind you that those were the 2.
However, we certainly encourage you throughout the process of your adult learning and areas that you would like to know more about to please begin to think about how the overlapping emphasis there may help you to learn more about the whole child or the group of children that you're teaching, because we know that in an effort to move forward and be prepared to use all of the construct progressions that have been developed, We really want you to think about taking this opportunity of this upcoming school year to begin infusing and embedding some of the other areas that you're learning about in order to help and grow your students in their development and learning continuums.
And again, this slide just shows the 5 domains and the constructs that go with each of the domains. And during the pilot, the reason that we have the 2 highlighted ones is because teachers found it overwhelming to learn the new assessment content in addition to learning the assessment process and the platform and the digital tools. So therefore, the object counting and the book orientation and print awareness seem to be the 2 best to start with. However, Jamie mentioned what we're going to show on the next slide, that it is, very important to go ahead and be familiarizing yourselves with all of the domains, because we recognize and you recognize the importance on focusing on the whole child, and the whole child is all 5 of the domains. And also, just so that you know, during this upcoming 2015-16 school year, materials for the other areas of development will also be available for use, and that'll be determined by your district and your school. And those materials will be in the emotional literacy, the engagement in self-selected activities, fine motor, following directions, letter naming, and midline motor development. So again, you are encouraged to explore and become familiar with the other constructs so that you will be well prepared for the following year, when kindergarten teachers will be required to address all the highlighted constructs. So, as you see in this slide, all 5 domains will be required for the following 2016-2017 school year.